All right, good evening, everybody. I'm Paul from Navionics here with the world famous Edwin Evers. We are going to have a webinar tonight to talk about contours and sonar charts live. We are recording. So if those of you who want to watch it later, you'll be able to go to the Navionics website, or Edwin will probably post a link as well to check it out later. You'll notice for those of you that are new to Zoom, you'll notice on the bottom there's a little Q&A button. If you click on the Q&A button, we're going to save some time at the end of the webinar to go ahead and answer any questions you've got. So if you do ask any, just be aware we'll probably wait until the end to keep things flowing smoothly. So Edwin, if you want to wave hello to everybody, we got 167 people watching you at the moment.
Awesome. Thanks, guys, for joining us tonight, and fire away on them questions, and let's try to keep it. Don't rub me in the dirt too bad over that classic finish. I'm pretty aggravated with myself on that one. But hats off to Jordan Lee, great guy, and great venue down there. I just was so excited to go to Conroe and not to win. I was pretty disappointed, but I'm ready to go to Toledo Bend. We start there Monday, and ought to be phenomenal. First week of April in Toledo Bend should be really good. So, you know, it's just an awesome lake, and some of this stuff we're going to talk about tonight's really going to help me at Toledo Bend. So we'll get into that here shortly, but glad everybody's joined us, and hope we have a lot of fun tonight.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share screens here, get us rolling. All right, let's do it this way here. There we go. All right, so Edwin, what I'm going to do, I'll kind of go through it, and then when you want to go to the next slide, I know you're going to have more talking points than I will, so you can see everything that's up, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, so on our first one, jumping in, you know, just kind of talk a little bit about this, you know, with SonarChart Live, you know, the initial launch that we had was for the mobile apps. We were able to connect with the Wi-Fi over GoFreeze and so forth. And Edwin, I know you used a little bit of this with the app, but you know, it just showed on the app, and it was able to show you're drawing a 1 foot contours. And you know, I know at the show, at the Classic, and a lot of people talk about SonarChart Live and kind of what it does. And do you want to kind of just give like a little thought about that a little bit, and then we can.
What's so awesome about SonarChart Live is there's so many bodies of water that I fish, and I'm sure some of you guys watching tonight fish, that, you know, there may be a part of that body of water that's mapped, but you may have a creek arm or a section or a shallow bay that's not mapped. Or you may have a private lake, or, you know, rivers. So many times rivers, the backwaters, they change with every flood. Every time I go to the Red River, those backwaters are different every single time. And with SonarChart Live, it's as simple as just turning it on, connecting it, and that will trans right back onto your Lowrance HDS Gen 3, and it's just a phenomenal tool. Like next week when I'm at Toledo Bend, so much of that stuff in that timber, I don't have those little small points or cuts or drains marked, that they can't do it because of the timber. And I'll have real-time mapping as I'm doing it right there on my Lowrance through this SonarChart Live through Navionics. It's just an awesome tool that it's going to help everybody, not just bass fishermen, but crappie fishermen. Our lakes are changing with every flood, with everything that happens. You know, it changes our lakes, and you know, those little 1 foot contours can make such a huge difference in your game plan, in your day, in figuring out those fish.
Well, what we've got, you know, as Edwin pointed out, is this was what it was like on the app. We're going to talk about how to read it and how to use it a little more. But this was before a version 4.5, which is the Lowrance version, and this, or the Lowrance update, where you can see it on the iPad. And you can still use your iPad and your iPhone, and that info goes to Navionics, and we improve the map. But what happens now after the latest update is now you can see the SonarChart Live directly on your HGS Gen 3s and your Elite TIs. So this is the newest update. This we're going to talk a little bit about. On that, one of the things I want to point before we jump a little more on the technical aspect is make sure you've upgraded or updated your Navionics card. When you get your Navionics card, you've got to register it to make sure that it works. Otherwise, the SonarChart Live will not work. As far as accessing it.
And to back up there, it's important to have your update on your Lowrance. I mean, it's super important. You know, it's really easy to update your Lowrances, but make sure your Lowrance is at version 4.5. It's simple as putting that card right in your unit and updating it, you know, taking that update off the internet. Is that what you're saying there, Paul? Maybe I missed that.
Well, yeah, exactly. So you got to update your Lowrance, and you want to make sure your card is active for freshest data. Because I know, Edwin, you know, we talked 2-3 years, however many years ago, on, hey, how do I update my card to make sure that, everything's getting updated, and walk through the computer and everything.
Oh, poor Paul. I would call him, it's late when we get off the water, and I've figured something out in practice, and I'd be calling him wee hours of the night or in the morning. And my hat's off to him. He helped me out a bunch the last few years and helped me win some tournaments. So thanks, Paul.
Oh, it's my pleasure, man. I didn't mind at all. Hey, every bit
I don't know about that.
Oh, it was no big deal. Friends are for, man. It's easy stuff. So, but how to turn it on? Very simply. Again, I don't want to make this too much of on a how-to. We're going to talk about more about catching fish, but it's just under your overlay option. Turn on your split screen. You have your SonarChart Live. Just click it on, and that's automatically going to run it on your plotter. So a little bit here, and Edwin, if you want to chime in on this, this is kind of what it looks like on before. So when you've got your Navionics map, this is your basic navigation data. Correct, Edwin?
Yes, sir. It's just a real basic map. We run into this a lot. A lot of bodies of water they don't have those great Navionics chips, or they're just very vague. It's an old, United States geographical map, and this is what they'll look like. And as you'll see here on this next slide, it's amazing what you can do with it and how much more detail. Look at the points and the cuts, and it is what we look for as fishermen to pick something apart that much quicker. You don't have to fish all the way around it to figure out, hey, there's an awesome little point right there. Deep water comes up really close. Those contour lines get super tight, or a flat. Same thing with a flat on the north end of it. It's an amazing function.
And what that does, for those that are trying to understand a little bit about it, is that Navionics and Lowrance, what happens here on this is it takes your GPS location and it takes your transducer, your depth, and it matches the two, and it draws those contours that Edwin's pointing out. That just gives you that extra detail. And, Edwin, I mean, you're pointing out you've got, I think on that top lump here, I don't know if we can see my cursor, but right up here, you're probably talking about where you've got that lump and that drop off.
Just really a lot more detail. When you look at that other map, there's just nothing there. And so many times that's the key stuff that we look for as professional fishermen, and it can make a huge difference in your day.
So we jump down. I know one of the things, Edwin, you like to do is you like to split screen a little bit so you can look at more options at the same time.
Yeah, that's really important for me because I still want to see the depth. I want to see if I'm going over any fish, brush piles, bait fish, all those things. So, the whole time I'm using the SonarChart Live, I still got my regular 2D down, my regular sonar right there. I can see what's going on. You're not missing anything. That's what's really important to me, is that, you're still able to do what you're normally trying to do, find fish. For me, having 3 practice days, I'm still able to do this and perform my job of practicing just like I normally would.
So now when you see this kind of stuff, then when you run over and you're mapping new and you're seeing that now, kind of when you see fish, do you go back and fish it a little bit and you don't set the hook, or do you kind of mark that spot on your SonarChart Live, or how do you kind of use that when you said kind of early days and pre-fishing?
A lot of times I'm going to map the whole thing out, or even before I had SonarChart Live, I would map it myself by making the same grids and just figuring out where the drops were, where all the fish were. I like to map the piece of structure out, or the drain, the ridge, that stuff's on my brain because I'm going to Toledo Bend, but at Erie, whatever it may be, and mark where those schools of fish were, or that brush pile. And then by the time I get to the end of it, go back and fish that from the beginning. That way my boat's, if it's shallow, my boat hasn't disturbed, everything's back to normal. I feel like, 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes later, I've let it all settle down, let my bubbles settle down from the engine, and I can go back and fish those fish in a natural state.
Makes sense. And, in here we talked about, I don't know if you want me to handle this, you want to talk about, but changing the transparency, as far as once you've run your SonarCharts Live and what's underneath as far as the Navionics map.
This is cool. You can still see the boat docks, that if you're counting boat docks, let's say you got a point out in front of the 4th boat dock down the left-hand side of a point, so you can increase and decrease that transparency. Your new SonarChart Live map is going to be much, much more detailed than what you had before, but there still may be some of those features that you had on the old map that you might want to bring through, and you can change that all real simply by the transparency.
All right. Now I know you were talking about earlier about the spawning cove with no contours, and you like this picture for a particular reason coming up.
This picture reminds me of Kentucky Lake. I don't have a clue where you guys got this, but there's so many of those bigger bays on Kentucky Lake, the upper ends or the upper end of Barkley, where it's a pretty flat looking creek or bay or you know, Rayburn has a lot of stuff like this, Toledo Bend. But there's always going to be a special little spot where that drain or that creek comes in tighter to the bank. Or, you know, there's a 100-yard stretch there where if you're going down the bank 50 yards off the bank and your boat's in 2 foot of water the whole time down that bank, and then all of a sudden it goes to 2.6. Well, that's going to be the key stretch where those fish are going to spawn. It's just a little bit deeper. They feel a little bit safer. They've got deeper water closer. And by able to map these kind of things, you're able to figure that stuff out really, really easy.
So with that, this was one you chose here, talking a little bit about an area like this, correct?
Yeah. Are you talking about this picture? Oh, yeah. Here's a river. You know, so many rivers, like we go to La Crosse all the time, and you get back in these sloughs. I can't tell you how many times I found a pot of smallmouth in the middle of one of these sloughs that'll have a little high spot. Well, now idling down those sloughs, I'm not wasting any time. I'm actually mapping that whole thing out, and you'll be amazed at what you'll find just idling back through those sloughs, going to a backwater. You'll see some little cut or depression or high spot that current will be rolling over. And so many of our rivers like this, you know, this is the Mississippi River, the Red River, that stuff's not mapped. And there's a good reason. It changes with every flood. So it's important to have this stuff in your unit to where, man, you can map that stuff out and you know what it's going to be like every time you go out there.
Now you mentioned we talked before and talking to Ross about, you know, the Horseshoe Bend on Pickwick and how this could have changed some things for you.
Yeah, pull that slide up if you can. I think I right here, and if any of you guys are from Alabama, you know, this is Wilson Dam right here. My cursor's working, wow. And this is what we all call the Horseshoe. And, you know, there was a year, I don't remember what year, but I finished pretty high. I was in the top 5 for a few days. I think the final day I didn't catch them near as good, but there's 4 or 5 of us fishing in there. And I had found all these rock piles. There's just a bunch of isolated rock piles in here, all out in the middle where there's no contour lines. And those fish were on the corners of those rock piles. They'd be on the upstream corner or the downstream corner, you know, because that current would roll through here and make a big eddy, then go back out. And depending on how much current there was, would be where those fish were positioned. And if I'd had SonarChart Live back in the day, as I'm fishing it, I'd map that whole thing out. And then I could tell exactly where those corners were, exactly which corner I was getting that bite on, and then duplicate it really quick before everybody else. You know, it makes my job a lot easier and a lot quicker to have that detail and that stuff mapped out. And this would have been a prime example where it really would have helped.
Yeah, so rather than just dropping a waypoint on and go, all right, let me run the transducer over it, and like you said, causing bubbles and everything else, you know exactly where you're going to drop.
Yeah.
So, and then here's the eddy. You were talking about the eddy focusing below the dam right there, correct?
Yeah, this is, do you see my cursor right there? You know, this is like, you know, in the spring when they got all this water flowing out of this dam, this is all out of the water right there behind that Jackson Island. And it's just a great spot, but there's really key spots within that horseshoe area.
And this here is your big smallmouth you had.
That was from, I'm going to guess, Lake Erie. You know, that was an event I was fortunate enough to win, but I was able to win that. I was able to win that event really kind of by accident. You know, I'm sitting there and I'm fishing a piece of structure that's on my map, and I happened to drift off of it. It was out here in front of Dunkirk, and I happened to drift off of it. And then here comes another giant rock pile that's not on any map at all, on no maps at all. And it was just amazing, the fish that were out there. And you can see right here, like, this is a prime spot, this dumping ground. That's called a dumping ground because for years they took and they dumped rock and rubble and stuff out there. So with SonarCharts Live, you don't have to idle every little actual piece of it. You can, when you idle it and you go back and forth, it's going to show you those high spots. It's going to show you those humps and all that stuff that you need to know and focus on when you're out there. It makes the job a lot easier. You're going to have a detailed map of stuff that changes daily, or a detailed map of something that's never like that. So it's never been mapped before.
Now, and that's your point. There was I was behind it, because there's what you're talking about, the detail that was not on there. That was the area you were talking about, the rocks you found a little bit off.
Yep.
So now you want to talk a little bit about challenges next week as far as Toledo.
Well, next week's going to be interesting. It's the first week of April. Last year when we were there, there was a lot of fish caught offshore. I actually caught a pretty big bag offshore a few of the days. But when you go to Toledo Bend, 90% of the pressure on that lake is below the Pendleton Bridge. And for very good reason, that area of the lake has been mapped way more than anything above Pendleton Bridge. And the reason is all this timber. They can't get those cartography boats up through that timber. They can't map it on anybody's unit. Lowrance's, Humminbird's, and Avionics, it just doesn't happen. But I'm not scared to take my nitro right through that timber and figure out exactly where that drain turns, or where exactly that high spot comes in, or that point comes in. So for all you guys that fish Toledo Bend or Rayburn and you don't have those really detailed maps, now you can do it. And you're going to be a leg up on all your competition, on everybody else out there fishing, and make your job a lot easier. Maybe you're just a weekend guy that wants to go fishing. It's going to make it a lot easier. You're going to see stuff out there that, I didn't know it turned right here, or I didn't know this high spot was right here. And you're going to have stuff to fish not only for the spring, but summer and fall, and through all the seasons, because you're going to have it mapped out.
Now, talk a little bit while we got this screen. Talk a little bit about how you relate the timber, maybe, to whether it's a high spot or a deep hole or something. When do you fish what relating to timber?
A lot of times that timber kind of will tell you a story. There's some leaning timber, there's bigger trees, there's certain types of trees that'll tell you, hey, these trees, these hardwood trees, they were on, certain kind of ground. These pine trees, they were on higher ground. These leaning trees, a lot of times they're leaning towards a slough or deeper water. But, when I go to Toledo Bend or Lake Fork, or a place that has all this timber, it can be really overwhelming for a guy. Or just like everywhere you cast, you think you should catch a bass. And what I try to tell somebody or teach somebody is take all the timber away. Take every bit of it, pretend that none of it is there, and figure out what's below the water, that underwater point, that high spot, that creek channel bend, and then fish that timber. It can just be really overwhelming for a guy. You see all this timber, it all looks great, but in reality, it still is going to be the contours that's beneath the timber, and then that timber on that contour is what's going to hold them. That's just a given. That's how it is. If that makes sense for everybody.
That's a great tip, actually. That's a really good tip. Because I look at that myself and go, man. Where would I start? You look at the big tree in the middle there. It's like, you got to throw something off that, bats, crankbait, or flip the jig, or and then you look over to the left. There's another one. So that makes.
If that big tree was like in 12 foot of water and it dropped off to 20 on each side of it and it makes a point, it'd be an awesome tree. But if it's just a 15-foot flat for 100 yards in every direction, I wouldn't pay it any attention.
Makes sense. So then here you're talking a little bit about the trails and the timbers, particularly about where you said take away your trees and look at your contours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like right here, this is right above Pendleton Bridge. You can see some of this open water that's been mapped, and there's a bunch of this water that hadn't been mapped before. It's just the detail that you can get by going and doing this. I'm really excited. This will be the first time I've ever been able to do this on Toledo Bend next week. I don't think those fish are going to be overly deep, but there's going to be a bunch of fish on beds, but still they're going to use those travel routes coming in and out of those spawning pockets. If I can find a little point where those fish got a go point, subtle point that it's in that timber that's kind of hidden that you can't see. That's one thing about Toledo Bend that makes this such a great tool for it. In a highland reservoir like, say, Table Rock or Bull Shoals, you can kind of look at the bank and you can figure out 60-70% of what under the water looks like. When you take a lake like Toledo Bend, Rayburn, even the lake right here by my house, Oologah, that's really, really flat, fish can be from one side of Toledo Bend all the way to the other, and they can live out there. There's 4, 5, 6 foot of water out in the middle of Toledo Bend that they can spawn on, so they don't have to go to the bank. And that's the great thing about Toledo Bend in this mapping is you're going to be able to figure that stuff out with so much greater detail than we ever have before, and it can make a really big difference.
Now, on the features and the menu items, I spend a lot of time on here, but when you do, those are listening, you do get your SonarChart Live turned on. You can play a little bit around with the density and say if you want 1 foot or 2 foot or 6 foot. So if you're just looking for specific depth contours, you don't want to look at 1 foot, you can. Edwin, you and I are probably going to stare at 1 foot. If there's a deeper lake and you don't want to look at that and try to figure out exactly where a faster drop off is, maybe there's some applications with that.
There's a lot of times that let's say Erie or let's say some body of water, you're really focused on 30 to 35 feet or 30 to 40 feet, whatever it is, you can really just dive into that. And that way you don't have so much other clutter on your screen, and it makes it really, really easy for you to digest and go through really quick, in my opinion.
Well, one of the things I'm going to jump on is and I'll let you jump on each of these, but upcoming with what we call this with SonarChart Live, there's another update coming that we call this plotter sync at Navionics. It allows you to sync your iPhone or your Droid to your HDS unit. And one of the things, Edwin, I know you're excited about is the sharing of waypoints, where you can sit in your hotel room and look at your map and plot it and swing it over. So, I mean, you don't ever do any pre-planning at all in your hotel room.
I can't tell you how many times I've been studying that iPad or that Navionics, app on there, and I was like, man, I'll see this great looking spot or see something that I think I really need to try. Write that waypoint down and then go enter it in the unit. So this is going to make it so much easier just to be able to share it over there on that Wi-Fi. And, I'll probably have 100 extra waypoints every night, going out there and adding to my unit. So, no, that's going to be really, really cool. If you let's say you go out there and you fish and you figure out, man, I caught them on, secondary points. Let's say simple secondary points in the backs of a creek. You can just go through and make waypoints on all those secondary points on the next 10 creeks and make you a big stop sign. And it just is going to glare on your screen the next day. You're not going to miss any of them. It just really, really helps me a bunch.
It'll be very simple. It's just a matter of connecting. And with that, you can also now on the Navionics app, now I should say very near future, update your app. So instead of taking your card out of your boat or trying to find Wi-Fi, you're going to be able to update your app connected to the Wi-Fi on the plotter, and it's going to update with the latest info. And Edwin, I know that's going to be important.
We go to New York. Me and Jason rent a lot of houses everywhere we go, and we don't very often have Wi-Fi at all. So to be able to update that stuff through my phone is going to be huge. We get cell phone reception just about everywhere we go across the country, but I don't always have Wi-Fi, very rarely. So that's going to be really cool to, keep everything updated, keep my freshest maps available. It's going to be awesome.
Well, then your house, like you said, if you're renting a house, you don't know what kind of router they have there. It could take you, you might get up in the morning, let it roll for 12 hours, and it's still updating that map. So just on your lake. So the one thing we didn't have
it'd be cool.
Go ahead.
Oh, you're right. It's just that's what's cool about it. It can be updating while I'm out fishing.
Well, the one thing we didn't have to worry about tonight, here's the simple process we talked about, and this right here is we just picked a spot off of Massachusetts, and this is actually off my phone. It's where our office is. And, right here, you just see the white. And this is just saying, hey, this area was updated. I connected it, and now I see my screen's glaring and saying, yep, this area is updated. So it's simple to see where it's updating as well, so you got the right one.
That's cool. Yeah.
But now, the one thing we don't have is Wi-Fi issues, and that's special thanks to our additional sponsor tonight, which is
Yeah, we did have to come to the pecan shop. If any of you guys were at the webinar we did last year, it was a struggle. I live way out in the country. I cannot get Wi-Fi. I mean, it's snail pace by the time it gets to my house. So I drove into town tonight up here to the pecan shop, and I got them right here. I'm eating them. I've done doused me a bag of them. I'm trying to be polite, not eat them while I'm talking. I'd be spitting stuff all over the screen. But no, appreciate everybody joining us.
All right. So at this point, I'm going to jump out of the PowerPoint here, and we're going to go ahead and answer questions. Let me stop our screen sharing here, Edwin. And let's stop share. We're just going to go back to our videos. And I am going to turn the recording off so we can go ahead and just start answering questions.